So it's my pleasure to welcome three women to our panel today to discuss entrepreneurship in COVID. We have with us Holly Metz-Doyle, the co-founder of the Buffalo Women's Consortium here in Buffalo, and also two colleagues of mine from Canisius College, Juliana and Sarah. And Sarah, I was lucky enough to travel with to Mexico back in November and got to know her a bit better. And they're all from the Whaley School of Business. Sorry, Juliana and Sarah are from the Whaley School of Business. And so if you'd like to say something about yourselves a little bit before we get into the deeper discussion, and we can start maybe with Holly.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. It's really an honor. And I'm co-founder along with Jen Stockman of Buffalo Women's Consortium. And we are a group of female artists and artisans, all hailing from Buffalo and Western New York. And we produce handmade or refurbished or a combination of both items. And we just opened a store February 1st and closed it March 15th.
That sounds incredibly challenging, and I look forward to hearing more about that. And thank you, Holly. Juliana?
I'm Juliana Golbieski. I am professor of economics and finance at Canisius. This will be my 6th year starting in August. Before coming back to academia, was in government. So I followed economic trends and sort of commented on the economic state of New York City and New Mexico back then. But I'm happy to be back in Buffalo, my hometown.
I did not know that about you, Juliana. Yeah, I'm learning something all the time. Thank you. And Sarah.
Hi, I am Sarah Woodside. I am slightly newer than Juliana at the business school. I've done 4 years, going into my 5th. And I am a professor of management, where my interest is really in the intersection of social mission, social purpose, and entrepreneurship. And so my research has been in social enterprise, and that's really expanded to include all kinds of buzzwords, right? Social purpose businesses, sustainability-oriented businesses, social enterprise. And while Buffalo doesn't have a lot of sort of explicitly labeled social entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurial environment in Buffalo is amazing and full of people who are doing really cool things that combine social purpose and contributing to the local economy. And so I've been following what's going on as COVID has hit. In terms of how small businesses and local entrepreneurs are responding.
Well, thank you for that, Sarah. And we hopefully have a list, right, of some of those enterprises and businesses that we can share with people who are interested in supporting those small enterprises.
Happy to do that, to post one on our course module.
Yes, thank you. So Juliana, I think we'll start with you. And as you know, our national leadership expressed a great deal of optimism regarding jobs numbers and so forth. And candidates running contrary to that have expressed that that is a falsely rosy picture. So I'm wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about how COVID has impacted economy, and maybe more specifically Buffalo, but within the context of the larger economic consequences.
Sure. So COVID had an almost immediate impact on the economy. U.S. unemployment rate in February was 3.5%, went up to 4.4% in March, went up to 14.7% in April. Now, that's just the headline. That is the official unemployment rate. The peak unemployment rate during the Great Recession was 10.6%. So we were 4 percentage points higher than at the peak of the Great Recession. And economists across the board agree that 14.7 understates the true impact on the economy. So it was unprecedented, outsized. Buffalo area experienced even more significant of a downturn. So we moved from 5% unemployment rate in March to 19.3% in April. As of last week, the data just came in yesterday. As of last week, we have unemployment claims in the Buffalo MSA of 175,000. That's 32% of the labor force. That is an enormous impact. It's a higher fraction than New York State. It's a higher fraction than is seen in Rochester and Syracuse. So in the Buffalo area, we are experiencing that economic impact directly. And as you mentioned, the headlines from last month and yesterday were that we've added jobs back. But at the US level, when you've lost close to 20 million jobs and 7 million come back between those 2 months, that's still, I mean, that leaves us with an unemployment rate, an official unemployment rate of 11.1%, still greater than the peak of the Great Recession. So, you know, we need to temper any enthusiasm, especially given what we're seeing in other states. More than half the states are experiencing surges in the number of coronavirus cases, and that is going to determine our way out of this economic downturn. We're highly reliant on the medical community to sort of solve the underlying health issue.
So Juliana, I actually was shocked by some of these numbers. I thought I was relatively well informed. Apparently I'm not as well informed as I thought. But why, so two things. I'm assuming that the official numbers are slightly lower than actual unemployment figures because people aren't filing or whatever.
Well, it's actually, it has to do with the way the Bureau of Labor Statistics identifies who's unemployed. So the current population survey is sent out to 60,000 households a month. They ask, do you have a job? So that determines who's employed. But then they ask, if you don't have a job, are you actively looking for a job? For people who were temporarily displaced from their job, they might say, I don't currently have a job and I'm not looking for one because I'm expecting to come back on the rolls.
Like furlough.
Well, those individuals, exactly. So furloughed people or those who were laid off for a short period of time, but they expected when their businesses reopened, they were back employed based on what their leadership had told them. But when they say they're not looking for a job, they're categorized consistently as not being in the labor force. So that means they're not counted as unemployed and they're not counted as the denominator of the unemployment rate. They're not counted as part of the labor force. So when we include them back, the unemployment rate goes up.
Mm-hmm.
So the true economic impact is going to be seen better by including them amongst the unemployed.
And just two more questions.
Sure.
I mean, for now.
No, of course.
Are these people going back into the workforce underemployed, fully employed, or like how?
So there are a couple of things happening. When we look at the unemployment rate, we're counting who's employed, who's not employed. When you go further down, there are different versions of the unemployment rate. We use the U3 version. If you go down to the U6 version, that also includes people who are working part-time who want to be working full-time. So that number's big, a lot larger than what would be reported. However, in the last month, that number went down. So the people who are working part-time for economic reasons went down. Of course, you know, we're still waiting to see what's going to happen as of July, because as you know, when we see states reclosing certain types of businesses, that is absolutely going to change.
So one last question on this subject then. Why is Buffalo hit so much worse than these other cities? I'm a little confused by that.
Okay, so we have a high concentration of service jobs. So just to give you an idea, between March and April, Buffalo lost more than 100,000 jobs. It represented about 18.8% of March's job level. In that same month, almost 60% of the jobs in accommodation and food services, which are hotels and restaurants, almost 60% were lost. More than 25% of the jobs in construction were lost. More than 20% of the jobs in retail disappeared. So for the types of workspaces that we closed down in order to stop the spread of the coronavirus, for those types of workspaces, we have a lot of our employment concentrated in those areas. So, you know, that's why we had an outsized hit.
So this actually prompts another question. Does this mean that
Sure.
the much purported Buffalo recovery and renaissance have serious flaws, that we don't have a sufficiently diversified economy? Or this seems to me to represent a bigger problem in Buffalo that we haven't seen clearly or have ignored intentionally. Could you speak to that?
Right. Well, you know, when we talk about Buffalo's resurgence, we often talk about what's happening on the waterfront, the development on the waterfront, things you can see, things you can capture with your own senses. So when you looked at the underlying jobs, we really didn't see a resurgence in terms of employment. We didn't see a resurgence in terms of wage growth. You know, we're called economics is the dismal science, because we always sort of bring people back to reality. But, you know, we saw things happening, but those developments were highly reliant on things like tourism, on things like local communities going out and spending money, you know, eating out, spending money going to the waterfront to rent bicycles, or, you know, those types of activities, which makes us all feel good, but puts us at risk in an environment like this, where all of that is shut off. You know, now where we saw the industries that were able to stay afloat and, you know, maybe even thrive a little bit, those are the ones that allowed our people to work from home.
If I just might make a comment on your point. So we opened a store in the Market Arcade building downtown, and we haven't reopened, although we have, so it's unclear whether we really can or can't, because it is a mall, blah, blah, blah. But we were told that we could, but we rely that Market Arcade building relies so heavily on traffic, both from the food court adjacent, but in the summertime specifically for tourists. And because they, you know, it's a tourist attraction, it's a gorgeous, you know, iconic building in Buffalo, but without, like you said, without, you know, that tourist, that even affects, you know, retailers as well, who happen to be located in the downtown area. I just wanted to add that, like, the reciprocal effect of it is, like, even more so than just the service area.
Right, that these things impact other areas, and it sort of ripples out further and further than we may initially imagine.
That's right.
So, Juliana, so are there public policies that could ameliorate some of this? And what's the long-term prognosis for Buffalo's actual recovery?
Yeah. Well, so in terms of public policy, that first round of stimulus, I put stimulus in air quotes because it wasn't really stimulating any new economic activity. It was keeping us afloat. We certainly weren't swimming, and we definitely weren't in a boat. We weren't moving anywhere quickly, but we were able to pay our bills, largely amongst those who were unemployed because of the supplemental unemployment insurance. That additional $600 a week really helped those households that were directly impacted by job losses. So that was extremely important. That runs out at the end of July. So unless new legislation is passed to extend that supplemental benefit, we could potentially see some problems as a result. That stimulus again, check, that went to a lot of the American households was also important. Again, it sometimes kept food on the table. So we spent a considerable amount of money at the federal level for those purposes, but it definitely helped. And it is being examined again because it doesn't appear as though we are going to recover anytime soon. The third thing I want to mention, the Payroll Protection Program was a loan for small businesses. That loan would be forgiven if the small businesses that received the loan hired back a certain percent, or hired back their workers and paid them a certain percentage of that total loan. Again, very important to keep those small businesses open, because in this environment where you have fixed costs like rent and leasing costs, you have potential paybacks on loans that you needed to buy essential equipment or other items. Those were important to keep on.
So Holly, did you apply for and or receive a PPP for your consortium? No. Could you explain why you didn't?
Well, we don't have employees, and we didn't want to take on any loans with the potential for, we just wanted to try our hardest to kind of pivot into a new direction to be able to continue to pay our bills and, you know, hopefully post a profit, and we were able to do so. So we didn't want to take on any loans.
Okay. I want to go back to that in just a second, but I want to follow up with Juliana one more question. So in terms of local Buffalo economy, well, I guess I have two questions here. One is, what can or should the city do to ameliorate and create a more sustainable path to recovery? And the other question is, when do you think the Buffalo area will turn around into more positive economic territory?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the economic development happens at the state level. So the state identifies a certain amount of funds for economic development in Buffalo. My response to this question is always identify industries that are going to both invest in Buffalo, so invest here and stay here, but also be sustainable. So sustainable in the sense that we can count on those jobs for a long period of time. We also want to diversify our economy. An economy that relies on just one industry is significantly more at risk for, you know, a devastating time like the one we're seeing here. College towns right now are very at risk based on whether or not students come, whether or not they're able to go out to eat and go to stores. So a diversified city is most well protected in these types of situations. When is it coming out of this downturn? I wish I could tell you. A lot of it's going to depend on the trajectory of the pandemic. If we see another surge in cases, we are going to go in the opposite direction. And that will only elongate our recovery. So a lot of it's dependent on things economists can't touch.
Right, like human behavior.
Right, exactly.
Can I add in one thing? Sorry, let's come back to this, but I just wanted to flag that there's been really interesting research about entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship in poor, underdeveloped countries, and ways that entrepreneurship contributes to poverty alleviation and economic growth. And there are some interesting insights from that research that I think are going to apply more and more to cities that have been hard hit by the pandemic. So one of the insights that we've learned from underdeveloped countries is that there are really 3 different kinds of what we would call entrepreneurial opportunities, ways that entrepreneurs can create a new business. And one is to look for self-employment opportunities. So to see what someone else does down the road that works and create that for yourself. So that might be setting up a market stall that serves local food, or a shoe cleaning operation, whatever it is. But there are 2 other types of entrepreneurial opportunity. One is what you would call a discovery opportunity, which is where entrepreneurs see that there's a whole new thing that they could sell that no one else is selling, whether it's a product or service, and there'll be a new market. And the third is what they call a creation opportunity, which is a sort of a more complicated process of an entrepreneur has this great new idea, and they sort of have to come up with it, and then they have to persuade the local customer that they want it, and then they take feedback from what customers say they want. And so there's this whole new entrepreneurial process that's iterative. And those second 2 opportunities, the discovery and the creation opportunities, create much more economic development because they can grow faster. As opposed to self-employment opportunities, which are incredibly important for individual subsistence, but have, from a policy level, have sort of less impact on economic growth. So again, just to flag going forward, we're starting to see the development of entrepreneurial infrastructure in Buffalo, especially supporting women's entrepreneurship. And a lot of that's being pushed by women entrepreneurs, and there's government response and local business response that's coming. And so one of the key pieces will also be to start having come out of that, thinking about how can the entrepreneurs that are supported find opportunities that are going to grow quickly and support not only themselves, but sort of an increased economic growth at the macro level.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sarah. I want to maybe take that in that direction, but I want to give Juliana an opportunity to expand on just one thing, and then we can segue into that, which is you mentioned about industries or economic factors to invest in Buffalo and stay in Buffalo. Are there examples of things that could or should be in that process?
So I'm trying to think of an example of something we should be targeting. Instead, what first comes to mind is what we had been targeting when we gave the tax benefits and the benefits to Tesla for Solar City. Those those benefits were targeted to a company that was in manufacturing. And oftentimes we will identify manufacturing firms when we are allocating those economic development dollars. Manufacturing doesn't look like it used to look. You know, we're thinking back to the good old days of Buffalo when, you know, people who were less highly educated stood on a production line and had good opportunities to make relatively high wages even without that education. Manufacturing is different now. We use a lot more capital and a lot less labor. So when we're identifying those candidates, we often give manufacturing a second or a third look. But you know, we've got to keep in mind we can't go back. We should go forward. And actually, one of the industries that's maintained much of the employment that they've seen is in finance, is in banking right now. So Citi, the bank, has been expanding its Buffalo facilities. It's been adding to employment, and that's been relatively stable. So that's one of the areas that has been maintained through this environment because the jobs can be done from home. The other thing I want to say with respect to the government is that one of the potential downsides of our recovery, a downside risk, is in government. State and local governments are going to have a very difficult time maintaining their level of employment with the much decreased revenue that they will be taking in. Income taxes are going to go down, property taxes, even though those are relatively stable in terms of how much people owe, people aren't going to be able to pay their property tax bills. Sales taxes are going down. People aren't buying as much, either because their incomes have gone down or because they're worried about their jobs. When you're worried about your job, you don't spend your money, you save your money. So that side of the discussion of employment really needs to get a second look. And I know the federal government is talking about state and local sort of rescue packages where they're going to send them some funds. But if that isn't done sooner rather than later, we're going to see more jobs in that area lost.
Which impact, I'm assuming, also like education sectors, both from K
Yes.
all the way to graduate.
I mean, education, fire, police, everything that is funded by government revenue is going to be impacted for sure. And actually, the latest round, I was just looking at the unemployment insurance claims through last week. One that saw a pretty significant uptick, I should say, was in education. Education is the only industry where in June, they lost more than 20% of the jobs they lost over this entire period. So we're actually seeing an increase in the number of jobs being lost in education.
That bodes badly for the long-term future too.
That's right.
Juliana, what you're saying, though, runs counter to the dominant political narrative of the past and industry and so forth. I don't know how we can change that narrative, but it seems to me that what you're implying and what Sarah has implied too is that the future is actually more in line with things that Holly is doing or that Sarah sees as trending in other areas. So maybe Holly, you could talk about how you came up with the Buffalo Women's Consortium, and then once you opened, how you managed to transition and survive, because you were open a month or so. I mean, very unfortunate timing, but you seem to have adapted. And so I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit about the origins of this consortium and then how you managed to transition.
Sure. So, So Jen and I started the consortium because we just sensed that people were hungry for having quality products, and people are kind of getting tired of Walmart and Amazon, basically disposable goods. And we also sensed that women a lot of women are aching to be creative. So we decided to band together, to create an organization where women can be supported in their work. So, for example, Jen and I both refurbish furniture. That was our original businesses. And so we would garbage pick pieces and turn them into, basically, like, from my perspective, I would turn them into functional art. And but we would put them in a store, and the store owner would collect 40% of the profit. And you can't make a you can't, not that we wanted to make a living off of it, but it didn't pay off. And so all these women were in the same position. So we wanted to give them a place where they could sell their wares, and we don't take that much of a percentage, and offer them marketing for free, and offer events where we would have booths for them that didn't cost $300, which a lot of them do, and all sorts of different benefits. So we launched at a festival in the last summer, so we're less than a year old. And so we slowly added members, and then over the holidays, we applied through the city, a free pop-up. And we won. We were in the Market Arcade in a pop-up in a shared space through the holidays, and it was a good way for us to see if our business model was feasible. And we did. We were very successful there, and we also had an event that coincided through the holidays, and we realized that we rented a space then in the Market Arcade building. And we realized that being in the Market Arcade, we needed to also be extremely event-driven, and what a great place to have an event. So it was like the culmination of a perfect scenario for us, because we could have events there. We were going to do them every 4 months, coinciding with each change of the seasons. And we opened up our shop, our membership grew, and we were, the Market Arcade is adjacent to a food court, and we would get lots of traffic during the lunch hours. And, we were looking forward to the summer when all the tourists would be coming in right across from Shays. So we were really excited. And COVID hit. So we closed our doors. I think our first day closed was Monday, March 16th. And Jen and I thought, what are we gonna do? Like, we had a website up, but we didn't have any e-commerce. So that week, the week of the 16th, she and I went to the store and grabbed as much of our merchandise as we could, like little bits of everything. And we have everything from jewelry to art to skincare, all natural skincare. And we brought it home. One of our members gave us a light box, and we started taking pictures of our products. And I managed to figure out how to make e-commerce work. And so the rest of the month of March was spent doing, setting up our website. And then Jen was asked by a couple friends if she could sew masks, because she can sew. And so she was giving them away. And people kept on asking her, can I buy them for you? I want them for my whole family. Like, people were starting to panic at that point, because of the news of the virus spreading, and nobody could get masks. And she and I had to have a heart-to-heart discussion. I said, and also I started producing hand sanitizer, and both of us, and in an organic manner with, vegan product. It was a lot, but anyway, we wanted to be mindful. And both of us were like, are we capitalizing on a situation, or are we providing a service? And, the more people just kept on reaching out to us. So we decided to do it. We put them on the website. We did it at a very fair price. And Jen and I were literally sewing night and day because people kept on placing orders, and it got to the point where it was too much for us. So one of our members is So Ready. They're a refugee organization that was founded by Pat Hutton, who is a professor at Canisius. This So Ready provides brand new, or I don't know, I think they're newer refurbished sewing machines to refugee women who are at home in Buffalo, and teaches them how to sew. And when I say teaches them how to sew, these women become true sewists. Their products are phenomenal. And we sell a bunch of their products at our store and on our website. And so we were able to utilize our consortium and the whole idea of a consortium to pull our members and start mass producing. So we have sold over 1,000 masks. We, Jen, actually my husband is the one who said, you should do door-to-door white glove service. So we kind of marketed it that way. We got our daughters, Jen and I both have teenage kids and her son, who were more than happy to make deliveries because they were bored out of their gourds, and it provided them an outlet. So through the month of April, they were out delivering, and the mask production that we started also started drawing people to our website. And so we started rethinking our marketing strategy and rethinking what we were doing. And then we also had, I don't want to get too far ahead of what your question is, but because we were so event driven, we also had to figure out how to have events virtually. And we did figure that out, and they have been successful.
So what's an example of one of these events?
So the first one we had was a virtual trunk show, Meaningful Gifts. And we reached out to and our membership has continued to grow. So we started out with 3 of us at that first festival, and now we have over 30 members. And we reached out to our members and asked who wanted to become involved. And we did it via Facebook. So our first event, we thought we could Zoom into Facebook. It's a funny story, actually. And we had all the members send us every item that they wanted in the show. So they would send me pictures and descriptions. I'd put it on the website, and then we scheduled links in our Facebook. So they went off every 2 minutes on this particular day. And we did press releases, we did everything. So people were drawn to the Facebook page, and the links went up every 2 minutes, and then we were going to Zoom and have our members, but it didn't work because we figured out why, which I'll tell you later. And so I ended up going live. So I was just on a Facebook Live, and Jen was on the phone, and she would read to me, oh, next is Leather Earrings by Alexa Joan. And then we talk about Alexa. I mean, we love our members so much. We know them all so intimately that we were able to talk about both them and their products. And then underneath it had a link that directed people, if they wanted to purchase, they could click on the link and it would go to our website and they could purchase. And then we did giveaways. And at the end of the show, we had drawings for 2 items. So everyone who made a purchase during the show was entered into the drawing, and then we picked randomly 2 members. But we learned that, like with Facebook, it's weird, the business page, not everyone can see the business page. So we had to after that, we made a shopping group, because if you're in our shopping group, you get all the notifications, and we can also zoom into a group. You can't zoom into a business page. At least we couldn't figure out how. And then we also started doing consortium chats, and we post them once a week where we do a Zoom. We taped today's yesterday and posted it this morning, where we have a discussion like this with one of our members. And typically when it's a maker, we start off in their like space and showing that people how they do what they do. And then we cut, and then we go to like a little nice forum and we talk to them about why they do what they do. And, you know, Jen and I are so adamant about like purchasing from these women supports not only them, but supports our economy. And, you know, shopping local is so important. And just like you guys have been saying, you know, supporting our local economy now is more important more than ever.
That's actually super fascinating, Holly. Thank you for sharing that. I have a couple of questions, but I also want to give Sarah and Juliana an opportunity to interject as well. So 2 questions. One is, did you have startup money, a loan, a government involvement to get this off the ground, or was this all just you and your partner?
We are so grassroots. So our business model is basically consignment. So we have no overhead. So we have an agreement with our members that we take 30% of what they sell. And then we have several streams of revenue. We have the sales. We have a membership fee of $50 annually. And we also have our events. Now that we've been virtual, we haven't been charging for these virtual events, but we might have to change this if we can't get back into the space. But then we also have our events. We charge events, and our members, and anyone can participate in our events, but our members, we charge half, which is next to nothing, because we really, really, really try to be fair. So we never took out loans. We never invested any money. We always are able to pay our rent, and I wish I had some wood or something, but like we've been making profit every single month. And, you know, this for us right now is our side hustle. You know, we both work do a lot of other things. Like we have our other businesses, and I work a part-time job. But we're hoping that in the very near future, this will be our gig. And to be truthful to you, we want Buffalo Women's Consortium to be more than just a shopping venue. We're trying to create a woman empowerment movement to make a change in our community. And we have a lot of ideas of how we're doing that and starting to put them into action.
So, I think it's brilliant to share the personal stories of the artists and craftspeople it seems to me more likely to draw in people who would then because you develop a relationship with the artist or craftsperson.
And you realize that they're really one-of-a-kind items. Mm-hmm. And you can purchase them with pride and give them as gifts with pride, and they also become like conversation pieces. Like, for example, these earrings are made from repurposed leather and hand painted, and every single one is different. So like I'll never forget, I went into a store thinking that, I'll not say the name of it, there were these beautiful blue earrings, like blue sapphire earrings. And I said, oh, I'll take those. And she said, okay. And she went and back and grabbed another one out of a bag. Like they were mass. I was like, never mind. Like, I don't want them.
Yeah.
You know, it's just so much nicer to buy meaningful items. And when they see the artist, they see the passion in them comes out and comes through in the discussions that we have.
Right. It's such an interesting model. My mother, when I was younger, was a potter and would do a lot of these traveling shows to sell her pottery. And it was a lot of work. I would go with her for very little payoff. Eventually, it was not a sustainable thing. She continued doing it for personal enjoyment. I mean, the pottery, not the selling.
Right, yeah.
So I guess that's a segue to my next question, which is, do you think, I mean, do you plan to go back into a physical space, and or do you think this new online virtual model is more profitable or more?
Well, Jen and I have been thinking a lot. So right now things are very up in the air with the Market Arcade, like I mentioned, and there's a benefit to having a space. I feel like having a space gives your business a little bit more legitimacy too. And it's nice to have people come in, you know, like Jen and I are also, way back when we thought of ourselves as the Angie's List of design is what we want to kind of become, because we offer a place where people can come to us, come to BWC and say, I need, for example, they, you know, find these beautiful shells on the beach and they don't know what to do with them. They can come to us and we can help them turn them into something beautiful with our members, you know, with our jewelry makers. Or, for example, we just have a new member who's a designer, and we're now developing a space on our website called Healing Services. And she is going to help people create sacred spaces in their home. So even if it's a small little nook, a reading nook, just a place where you want to go and just feel at peace, which is so necessary now. And like part of healing yourself is just to get away in a place where you can, you know, be at peace. But she will collaborate with other members of our consortium to make that happen. Or we'll use, you know, items that people have in there. It's not about spending $10,000 to create a space. It's about using found treasures and handmade items to create a space that you love. So we kind of need a space too, even if it's just by appointment or if it's specific hours. We feel that if we would benefit from a space. But it's so nice now to have this online presence, because even when we do go to the space, we were getting very cramped because we have a small storefront, and it was hard because our membership is growing. And we also couldn't sell some things because of the Market Arcade. You know, they don't want a lot of competition among the retailers. But now we can tell people when they come in, oh, I like this, but I wish it was blue. And we can just say, well, we have it. We can, you can order it online. We'll deliver it to your house tonight, or you can pick it up tomorrow. So it gives us a lot more, what's the word? Not just option, but a lot more fluidity. Like we have a lot more we can do. And we just keep on coming up with more and more ideas as we go along, because it's, you know, kind of developed that way.
Right. So it seems that despite what could have been a very negative experience, this has been a creative, or
Yeah.
not super creative rethinking.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I don't mean to like, you know, we happen to be in a position where we could do that. Like I understand like restaurants don't have that same ability. But you know, I was thinking a friend of mine owns a bar and he kept on posting that, you know, it's kind of horrible. And I kept on thinking, he should like come up with an idea of coming up with like a drink of the day and deliver like a quart size drink, like cool concoctions, and deliver to people's houses. I don't know, like with New York state laws, I know alcohol is like, but you know, like sometimes you have to just make lemons out of lemonade. And I know, I mean, lemonade out of lemons. And I know it's, I don't mean to make people think that they're not, but like you have, like in order to rise out of this, we have to make the most of the situation. And, you know, just like Juliana said, we have to like rethink about, you know, the city has to rethink about becoming so centered in one industry. That's just my 2 cents. I'm no economist by any means. I don't even know what half the stuff you guys were talking about. So.
Well, Holly, I'm very impressed and very interested in all that you've discussed, and we'll have the link to your website on the module. And we can also put that to the Facebook page for the class as well. So, but I also admire the creative response, because I think that oftentimes it's not easy, but it's a default position to be pessimistic about things rather than trying to find creative solutions, not knowing whether they'll work.
And, you know, I also want to add too that we really strive to be very diversified in our member base and continue to be. And we also have been starting those tough discussions about, you know, what's happening in our society. And we did do a consortium chat with an African-American member, and we did, you know, get involved in that. And I also think that that's super important for the future and for improving our economy, is to recognize that minority business owners need to be supported. And, you know, I want to give kudos to the Market Arcade. There is such a diverse group of retailers in that space, and they are all so extremely talented. And it really is becoming like a maker's market, you know, and really great artisans in that space.
No, that's important, and I think empowerment for women, for people of color, and minorities of all versions. I think it's important to have the space and the economic opportunity for empowerment. Sarah, I wonder if you would like to talk about other examples of perhaps hopeful entrepreneurship responses to this, in, you know, similar to what Holly has done, but other examples.
Yeah, there's so much to be depressed about right now. But when you talk to some of the individuals in Buffalo, in our case, what people are doing or making happen or are forced to make happen is amazing. And yeah, Holly, I would definitely echo your statement that, you know, not everybody has the resources or the supports or is in the industry where that's possible. You know, it's not all a matter of individual grit, but those who have been able to pivot, to use a business language, have done some amazing things. So I'm happy to give you a few examples, and please stop me if I'm starting to sound repetitive. But really, we see like 3 categories of response among local entrepreneurs. Some people were already entrepreneurs, some people became entrepreneurial. And of course, the major response is the group of entrepreneurs who pivoted or made that change just to survive. And sometimes that means they're really thriving. now. There's amazing stories of thriving, but the focus was really what can we do to stay afloat during the pandemic. So you've seen a lot of people try and be creative around how they can take their product or service online. So Holly, like you, there was a company run by two women that just opened before the pandemic called Little Buffalo. It was one of these kids play spaces that is becoming more and more popular, an indoor kids play space. And the pandemic hit, and so they've created week-long activity packages that parents can buy to provide basically like a week of fun education. And they've gone to online birthday parties as well. So they have tried to take what they're good at and figure out how they can package it and put it online. Again, so they can survive until they get into their space. And they may find that is enough of a great idea that they continue to do these online services as well, especially if the schools don't open, right? Because they've managed to capture what they're good at and think about it in the context of what parents need in terms of these activity kits. Then you may have heard of what they're calling Live at the Drive, which is Buffalo Ironworks, which is a lot of concerts in a great big space, can no longer have concerts, and who knows when we'll have concerts again, right? They say that the arts may be the longest suffering industry. So they've paired up with the Transit Drive-In, and they're doing a concert from 7 to 9 and then a movie when it gets dark, and they're trying to feature bands that can transition into the movie in some way. So there's a theme. And so again, I think it's a cool enough idea that they may actually continue it post pandemic, and that like it's hard to go to a drive-in in the summer and wait till 9:30 or 10 if you're an older person like myself. So they've got people sitting in their cars. They've got service coming in.
My friend went last night. She loved it.
It's so cool, right? And again, it's this idea of pivoting to survive, right? This is how Ironworks is going to survive, so the drive-in can actually grow their market a little bit. And then there are the groups, again, like the Buffalo Women's Consortium, who have tapped into making masks and hand sanitizer. And then there's this great example in the restaurant industry of Osteria 166, which is a restaurant that had to close immediately. And the owner was really compelled right away to start finding ways to feed local families who were impacted, because that was his skill. And kind of like you found with your masks, Holly, all of a sudden he had customers and local people in Buffalo saying, well, can we donate to your effort to feed people? So on the one hand, he was working and he could employ some folks because people were donating and he was sending meals out. And then he realized, well, hold on, there's actually an opportunity here, which is to start creating frozen restaurant meals and selling them. And he's paired up with 6 local restaurants, including Simply Pierogi, which has a Canisius alum working for them. And Simply Pierogi sells in the Broadway market. So Osteria 166 has 6 restaurants they work with. They create a $10 frozen meal for one, or you can buy the family size. And you can order through them. And they're also selling their frozen meals in dashes, or they'll deliver to you. And they're doing great. So he's continued to do the feeding Buffalo families in need, donated meals, and marketing this very sort of local restaurant quality frozen meal. So again, this example of like pivoting to survive, but finding ways, if not to thrive, at least to survive until things can go back to normal, but maybe this will continue to be an arm of the business. So that's one group. And then there's this other group of brand new organizations that have arisen in response to the pandemic. Some are temporary. So another food-oriented one, which again, I think is just such an interesting example of looking at partnerships. It's called Western New York Feeds the Frontline. And you've got two women again, so there's a theme here, who developed essentially a temporary nonprofit. It's being funded by the New Era, CAP Foundation, and another company, Paramax. And they are getting donations to get meals out to hospitals, to frontline medical workers. And they have raised I have the number in front of me somewhere. It's about $350,000 through donation. That's all gone to getting meals to frontline workers at hospitals. And then another local organization that's brand new in response to the pandemic, which has said it will continue, it's still a work in progress, called Open 4. And it's starting to address this issue of long-term economic development. And it's, again, public-private partnerships, foundation money, corporate money, with input from local businesses, saying, how can we create infrastructure that's going to support local small business and nonprofits, and not just help connect grassroots to funding, but also look at small business development support, right? Marketing, scaling, incorporating technology. So it is starting to get at some of these questions around, you were asking from a government perspective, but also from a sort of foundation perspective. How can we think about making Buffalo more resilient should a pandemic or other shock hit again? And then the last group of small businesses are, to me, another sort of surprising but interesting example of what happens in entrepreneurship elsewhere too, which is that when shocks hit, there are people who are in the idea stage of entrepreneurship who decide, okay, I'm going to actually move up my timeline and jump in because my idea is perfect for this. So an example of that is actually a new plant shop that's going in on Elmwood called Plant In It. And this is a woman who has had an idea that in a year or so she would start a plant shop, and realized that there's empty storefronts now that she can run, that people are gardening, and people need this sort of sense of therapeutic space. And she's going to open her plant shop right now. She's hoping for July, which is, I guess, now. So there are those who are diving in because somehow this has created that opportunity. And Holly, your example of maybe jumping into this healing space or healing therapies provision is another example of that. I think you were saying that have been on your mind, and it's actually perfectly aligned with current conditions. So you know, there's a variety of approaches to being entrepreneurial. And one thing that the literature says is that the people who are most at risk when there's macroeconomic shocks or major things that go on in the economy, the entrepreneurs who are most at risk are the ones who were already in operation but struggling, right? Those are the people who are most likely to pack up and stay closed. And it has to do with sort of our behavioral tendencies towards risk aversion as opposed to risk willingness. Whereas the people who are just starting to get going, they have so little left to lose that they jump in. And the people who were already doing okay, they're entrepreneurs and they were doing all okay, don't really pay attention to the potential downside, and they keep going. So I think we sort of see that as well in some of these entrepreneurs who are making it go a bit or staying afloat.
This has been fascinating for me to learn. I didn't know about most of these little businesses. So I'm very glad to know about them. And it gives me hope to address the things, the more, what was it? What was the term you used, Juliana, of dismal? Wasn't that the word? The more, the darker side of the economic news. These are stories that are very hopeful, both, I feel, at least both for the short term during COVID and for a longer term reimagining of local economies. I've learned a lot, and I found this really fascinating. I don't want us to, well, I want to give each of you the chance to say any other things you'd like to add before we close our session here.
I just want to mention, and I forgot to, and it would be bad if I didn't mention this, that with our mask production, like part of our ethical dilemma was, we solved that a little bit, was with every 10 masks that we have made, we've donated 3 to, you know, to the, I keep on wanting to say first responders, but like to the medical profession, or, you know, to people who couldn't afford a mask. So we've been donating all along, and we, you know, I think that's important to, you know, the more you get, you know, you give what you get, or get what you give.
Right.
I would add two things, and it follows on, Holly, what you said. So one is we've all been forced to pay attention to the social impacts of our actions and our businesses, partly because there's such social need out there. But certainly among my students, and even among the Buffalo community, like there's an amazing membership organization called the Western New York Buffalo Sustainable Business Roundtable. 75 plus local companies who are interested in being more sustainable. Like, one of the possible upsides of the pandemic is that there'll be more attention and more support for people understanding that companies can and should exist to support more than just generating profit, but our own purpose, needs in the world, the environment. Like, I'm hoping that comes out of what we're going through. And the second thing I just highlight is the role that women are playing in the maintenance of what is being maintained in the local economy, and the potential, and that there are also groups that are growing, not necessarily from the pandemic, but the Buffalo's really started to see the emergence of groups that are supporting women's entrepreneurship and women and minority entrepreneurship. And there's so much potential for what local entrepreneurs have learned by surviving COVID to inform those support organizations, and for those support organizations to feed back into local entrepreneurs. And there's, by and large, they're looking at women and minority entrepreneurs. And obviously what our panel hasn't addressed is the presence of the Black Lives Matter protests and the challenges that minority entrepreneurs face, and the difficulties that minority-owned businesses have faced is significant. And again, hopefully there'll be some kind of movement on that front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one thing that has come up over and over again during this whole series of conversations for this course has been whether the responses of whatever nature, economic, creative, social, whether those will be maintained, like whether this is a short-lived response and we'll just go back to old habits, or whether we will actually evolve in multiple aspects of society towards something better, which is what I hope. But that, I think, is the current question on many people's minds.
Right. And You know, I'm hopeful for the consciousness that it has provided. I mean, every decision we make now, I make after thought. I don't do things because I've done them every day. Here's what I do for lunch. It's Tuesday. It's taco night. You know, every decision is being thought out. So I think that we will have been in this environment long enough where that will be ingrained. And what I had told my students when we were going into this, I said, you know, this could have potentially devastating economic consequences. You, as consumers, have power. The businesses that you want to be around when this is over are the businesses you need to support throughout this period of time. They need you as a consumer. So we have a lot of power in that way, and I think a lot of people are realizing the power they have in their respective positions. So
I think that's
positive.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think that we often forget the power that we have as consumers, as students, as professionals. We sort of accept a place in the machinery without sort of questioning it. And I think that this has been a difficult time, but something that does have positive possibilities that are worth considering. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us and contributing such an interesting discussion. Holly, I wish you the best of luck as you continue with this consortium. It sounds super interesting, and I can't wait to check out the website. And Sarah, I know that you'll, if we need to add to our list of links, that we'll add all of these things that you mentioned of the different opportunities to support what Julie says, which is to empower ourselves locally. So thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.